Hello, folks. So we are here in Berlin. This is 17.7 Pod episode 5. I'm here with Graeme Jones and, of course, with Florin on the other side of the sofa. Now, Graeme Jones came into contact with Open Bank Project back in 2011 at Open Knowledge Foundation conference in Warsaw, wasn't it? Then I met you a year later, Open Knowledge conference, we think it was Helsinki.
Yeah.
We've been in touch over the years about open banking stuff. Actually, Graeme was the first person who actually said the phrase open banking to me. Before, it had always been Open Bank Project. Same concept, but you were the first person I heard the phrase open banking from. So we've been in touch over the years. Then a couple of weeks ago, you got in touch, said, "Hey Simon, fancy a catch up? I'm going to be in Berlin." So we met in the park. We had a walk in the park yesterday, and you were talking about your journey regarding some, I don't know, shit going down in in the Isle of Man. Maybe you could first describe to our listeners and viewers the Isle of Man in kind of geographical terms, population terms, legal terms, what its relationship is with the United Kingdom and so on, and then after that, Florin's got a bunch of organised questions.
Okay, so the Isle of Man is not part of the United Kingdom. It's an autonomous region. It's legally speaking, it's a crown dependency, similar to Jersey and Guernsey in the Channel Islands, but not the same as the other British territories, overseas territories, which have a higher level of independence or nation status or Commonwealth membership, etc. We were never part of the European Union, so we weren't involved with Brexit. We have our own money, we have our own parliament, we pass our own laws, we have our own tax code, and we have the same sort of election system, but we didn't really have political parties, but we had versions of Labour and versions of Liberal Democrats, etc. Mostly independent MPs are elected, and from them we have 24 MPs, and we have department ministers and a chief minister, or in essence a prime minister.
And who's the ultimate boss, Graeme? Of the Isle of Man.
The ultimate boss of the Isle of Man is the king, who is the head of state, and
King Charles.
King Charles, yes.
Right.
So typically we have an open air parliament sitting one day per year called Tynwald Day, and in the old days, sometimes we would have the reigning monarch visit or a representative from the wider royal family, but equally somebody from the Norwegian royal family, because that's another old part of our history was that we used to be part of Norway, and interestingly we used to rule Scotland from the Isle of Man on behalf of the Norwegian Vikings.
Oh, wow.
And Iceland as well.
What do you mean, and Iceland as well?
So it was
you
like
used to rule Iceland?
no. So Norway ruled Iceland, and Iceland ruled the Isle of Man, and the Isle of Man ruled the Scottish Islands. It was all quite complicated.
Okay.
So we have an open air meeting once a year, and so any new laws that have been passed in the last 12 months have to be formalised. But you also have the opportunity to petition the king directly, which is an ancient right, which you don't have the same kind of right in the UK anymore. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. And
geographically?
Sorry.
So geographically, we're halfway between the Republic of Ireland in the EU and the UK, England. Roughly halfway, and we're about 600 square miles. So that's
Population?
85,000, but the strategy is to increase it to 100,000 quite quickly for a bigger tax base, etc.
Okay. Right. And do you want to say something about your professional background and so on and so forth?
So I graduated in software engineering. I went into software development, and then I went into wealth management as a group IT manager, and then I went into more project management contracts, and so I worked in the Dairy Farmers Co-op, which was private sector but public funded, and then I went into an external systems audit of a government department, which took half a year, but also it was a whole pile of it was my first real insight into how government works, and it was fascinating, and I wrote a big report, and I didn't realise that's how things worked. Not like the private sector.
What do you mean you didn't realise that's how the things work?
It didn't work like the private sector.
Okay.
So, and people thought that was okay. But of course, when someone from the private sector comes in and they've been paying a lot of tax, they are surprised that's not where they thought the tax went.
Okay.
So there was a lack of transparency. So that was my understanding for wanting more transparency with open banking and a government bank accounts and technology trial with Open Bank Project, etc. So, but after that contract, I was then offered a permanent role with the Parliament as half IT and half research for MPs, for any MP. So that's quite unusual in itself. Most researchers are for a particular MP, but I was a researcher for all MPs. So yes, I worked into the Parliament, worked for 10 years, until the last couple of years were problematic, because I had I'd had a year secondment to Treasury, and that's when I was working with you guys for a year, and I then went back to working more focused on the Parliament side. However, I was also still doing all the self-employed work, and I was looking at my accounts and my tax return, and I was talking to an accountant, and I discovered what appeared to be a mistake with my wife's payroll.
Okay.
And she was a police officer, and essentially there was a housing allowance, and it was meant to be index linked.
Okay. A house allowance. So what's that you get?
House allowance, yeah.
Okay.
So, and also it was tax free. So that was, it was quite a significant part of the terms and conditions. Yeah.
Okay.
So the accountant said, I never seen this before, but you work at the Parliament, so go and get the regulations and put me in the right direction, so I can give you the right advice. So I went and got the regulations, and this is when I went through the regulations line by line, because I was doing a lot of work with the legislation, and I discovered that it was meant to be index linked, but it had never been implemented. So I then realised that it was a bigger problem. It was more than just my wife. I spoke to a lawyer, and it was who said, well, maybe there's others that have been got old terms and conditions, not necessarily new terms and conditions. And so maybe it was 50 people. So suddenly this £5,000 to my wife was 50 times 5,000 perhaps, which made it a bigger problem. However, I just innocently sent an email to the police payroll and said, oh, there's been a mistake here. I'm trying to fix my joint tax return because we're married.
Okay.
And it all went silent for a month.
Okay.
And then I was working in London, and I got a text message, and what have you done? And what had happened...
From who? From who?
From my wife.
Oh
She
dear.
was not happy.
Oh dear.
She had been leaned on by the police trade union, and she'd been told there was no mistake, she wasn't going to get any money, and to tell her husband to back off. And that set the alarm bells going.
Oh dear.
That's when I realised this was not going to be a walk in the park.
Right, like we had yesterday.
Yeah.
Which year was that?
So this was December 2016. So it's quite a long time ago.
A long time.
But of course, you always think, whatever the problem is, a government is going to act responsibly. And so I chased it up. I then was getting no response, and so I went to see the chief executive of the Parliament, so my senior manager. I explained the situation, and of course this was Parliament's legislation that the police department had not implemented, and so therefore it's pretty obvious that they'd broken the law. However, I'm not a lawyer, and I logically explained what I believed had happened, that there'd been a series of mistakes. However, the more and more I dug and the more resistance I got, that's when I started to realise that there was a quite surprising and quite shocking cover-up culture. And then I thought to myself, well, it can't just be me that's finding these problems. So the more I asked around, because it's a small place, relatively small place, I asked around and I discovered that in reality there'd been over 100 or 200 other public sector workers that had received out-of-court settlements in whistleblowing situations.
Oh, really?
To keep
100 or 200?
Yeah, 1 to 200, yeah.
Wow.
And this came out with an MP that was asking too many questions. Ironically, recently sacked as a minister for supporting whistleblowers. So this is a long-running problem. There is a cover-up culture, but our Prime Minister has gone on record in the Parliament and said there is no corruption, there is no cover-ups culture, and everything, anything that was broken has been fixed. We've had a couple of inquiries, we've had some high-profile other court cases with, for example, the number 2 of the health department, the chief medical officer, had raised a whole number of issues as we went into the COVID-type lockdown. That ended up being a 3-year court case, I think, and being awarded over £3 million compensation because she proved she was right.
So getting back to your case...
Yeah, so I was not a lawyer. She was married to a lawyer, which helped, but I'm not married to a lawyer. I was just married to a police officer, but we both know the difference between right and wrong. But I was able to logically piece together what I believed had happened. And of course, that got darker and darker and darker the more I dug and the more I found out. But it's actually fast forwarding from 2016, the first discovery, to the start of this year. I uncovered more documents from what's known as the Public Records Warehouse, part of the Freedom of Information system, and I reviewed an archive box from the police department, and I discovered over 200 pages of evidence that was material to my case. There had been a court order against the Attorney General and the police department to disclose the documents, but the documents were never disclosed. However, I uncovered them in the start of this year, and in essence...
Because they had been sealed or something?
They had been sealed, yeah. They'd been sealed by the Prime Minister at the time. And they were unsealed technically on the 1st of January this year, but the first day that they were open was the 4th of January, and that's when I went and asked to see to see the boxes and the documents. I didn't want to tip them off. I didn't want to tip them off with my more recent experiences of the cover-up culture. I was concerned that the documents would disappear.
Okay.
But in essence, a key document says you can't do what you want to do because it would be illegal. And that is from the Attorney General's chambers to the Chief Executive of the Police Department. And it was, it proved everything I'd ever alleged in my whistleblowing and in my court case. Unfortunately, clearly I was very disappointed, but this has had a huge impact on my career. It's had a huge impact on my personal life, and financially it has been disastrous. Not just for me, but for 231 police officers. And so I now firmly believe that this is my case is the Isle of Man version of the high-profile UK post office scandal. It's all the same issues. It's the government lawyers hiding things, lying about things, even going as far as perjury or treason. Like a couple of hundred years ago, it would be treason, and dealt with more effectively. But I know, for example, in the UK post office scandal, a lot of the government lawyers are expected to be to face disciplinaries and most likely be struck off, and some may actually go to prison. I see no difference between the two cases.
Can you tell us about this? When you, I understand you made a petition to the late Queen of England. Yes.
So on that open air Parliament meeting day, I drafted a royal petition, and I walked down this procession way
in
the Isle of Man. Yeah,
okay.
In the middle of the Isle of Man. I walked down this procession way, surrounded on both sides by British soldiers and Royal Navy personnel, all holding guns, all looking at me.
What were you wearing, by the way?
I was wearing a suit.
With a tie?
With a tie and a shirt, yeah.
Okay.
And I was hoping that the cover-up culture would not get any more extreme.
Okay.
I already have to check my health and safety in the supermarket car park in case I'm accidentally run over.
Right.
So what I've discovered when I passed all my new evidence that had been deliberately concealed, which is an offence, of course, I was told that this wasn't what I thought it was maybe a £500,000 problem. This is actually a nearer 10, 12, 11, 12 million pound problem. And the problem for me is that with this cover-up culture, the Attorney General's chambers have known about that I was right from day one. I've always known I was right, and I've completely and utterly operated a broken system.
So who? I mean, if that's 12 million, I'm not really good at mental arithmetic, but 12 million divided by 80,000 or whatever, that's a significant amount of money per taxpayer, right?
Yeah.
So what, can you say something about what are the issues here? I mean, corruption, what's wrong with corruption, basically?
Yeah, what's wrong with corruption? Well, if only we had open banking and the government's bank accounts were more transparent. I would like to think that this problem would never have happened, or it would have come out sooner, and other people's problems would have come out sooner, or never happened in the first place, because people would know about the transparency. They would not try to cover it up. And I think that's the benefit of this level of transparency, particularly around the money. They always say follow the money. And it's just true in this situation as in all the other situations.
Florian, let Florian have the mic for a second, so you can.
Sure. So you've gone through a lot of the points we wanted to discuss, which is actually very, very good. You, however, made a decision, a very deliberate decision to sue. And I would like to ask what led you to this, to taking this decision in the first place. I mean, you've explained a bit about the amount of money that is involved into this, but there's actually personal lives involved into this. There's beyond taxpayers, there's people's lives that are at stake, people's well-being. How did in this journey of yours, what led you to make this very, very hard and tough decision? You're one of the many that have been involved into this, and you seem to be the only one who has made this very radical step towards this.
Because I believed in the system and believed in right and wrong, and of course people were going to come to their senses, and if you can't look after the police officers or doctors and nurses, who, this problem is going to be, only magnified, because they'll do it to everybody. So my attitude was, yes, all these people had been underpaid. However, I was forced out of my job because I would not let the issue drop. I was given unlawful instructions to ignore the problem and to not do anything else about it. I disobeyed that order, and I filed a whistleblowing claim. And that has been furiously resisted. I've been discredited. I've had a media smear campaign saying that I'm an organisational terrorist. I've had everything. I've been called crazy, you name it. But of course, the people that are most right are always portrayed as the most wrong. And I was shocked at how badly I've been treated by government and a parliament that I've spent my, half of my working career with. It's very disappointing. But of course, yes, the personal impact is that by being forced out of your job, you're losing your salary, you're losing your pension. It's not quite a gold-plated pension in the public sector, but it's a significant pension. And but I've lost all these financial benefits. However, what I then discovered was that what I thought was going to be a 3-month or 6-month, maybe even 9-month process has been years, because they don't want me to win. They don't want the truth to come out. They don't want to pay the victims. And they certainly don't want to pay me any compensation for fighting them so hard.
What's the current status, and what's the actual case that you're trying to bring now? Is the approach that you fight this kind of illegal dismissal thing, and then focus on the financial kind of misconduct of the police or whatever it was, right? What's the kind of route? Or
so so technically I've lost the employment tribunal in the lower court. I took that to High Court as an appeal. I've then had to fight a case in the appeal court, so I'm fighting on 3 levels. And if I can't resolve this problem in the Isle of Man legal jurisdiction, I will have no option but to go to the UK Supreme Court. And that I'm all in, right, Simon, because I've not worked to my full capacity for the entire period, pretty much the entire period of this court case, which has been 4 years now. So that's obviously a significant impact.
So the UK Supreme Court, they're the boss under King Charles, right?
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
So there is a relationship between a legal relationship between the UK and Isle of Man.
Yes.
Somehow.
So it's kind of arm's length, but my objection is the fact that all of the worst people in this cover-up club, and that the people that have caused me the most problems, are all UK appointments. So it is the UK appointed Her Majesty's Attorney General. It is, who is not from the Isle of Man, is South African. We've got a UK solicitor who is the lead lawyer against me. but aided and abetted by 6-7 other lawyers in the same chambers. Yeah, I mean, you're fighting as one person. What you thought was a short case in a very obvious case of what I thought was a mistake. However, you find yourself fighting every department, some people in every department, who are all closing ranks. They're all team players, as they call it. And you only realise how broken the system is when you fight and fight and fight. And the reason is that you don't get legal aid for employment matters, which is a problem because you should in whistleblowing cases, I believe. You don't get legal aid if you're married, which is crazy because most whistleblowers, when we talked previously about 100 or 200 other whistleblowers, they're mostly, been in their career a long time. 20, 30 years experience, they're most likely married, they maybe have children, and they don't want to see these problems, become worse and worse over the years. So they whistleblow, and then they hit the same walls that I hit. However, they then give up. But I was horrified what I discovered and the attitude that I encountered.
And what do you think the UK gets from this kind of arm's length relationship, right? I mean, I've heard about like the City of London's kind of arm's length relationship to the UK government, and like there's kind of grey zones, right, where they can do certain, maybe less than clean deals, and then kind of claim, like distance from it. Is it similar with Isle of Man?
Yes, so like Isle of Man, Jersey, Guernsey, Gibraltar, all of these offshore British territories are, have become well regulated in the sense that the private sector businesses know what's going to happen if they try to cover up problems. However, the public sector regulating them doesn't appear to be playing by the same rules.
Okay.
That's what the issue is. And I think you could easily say, for argument's sake, that maybe £100 billion worth of deposits or business or contracts flow through, any typical, offshore jurisdiction, in 1 year or multiple years. So it's a lot of money. We're talking hundreds of billions of pounds or euros or dollars. However, a problem, even a £12 million problem, is small. It's a rounding error. In this sense, and therefore the UK is not interested. In fact, they've gone worse than not being interested. When I presented the new evidence of corruption, it's absolute black and white, and we'll be able to see it with a link. The UK Ministry of Justice sent me a response to say that they will not consider any further correspondence from me because they believe that the issue has to be resolved locally. It's not their problem. However, as I explained, all of the people causing all of the problems, the worst problems, are all UK appointments. So I think it's a sham excuse. Bad government. Who knows if this will change after the election?
Do you feel alone in your pursuit? Or do you have people who are supporting you?
Yeah, right. I have a support network. Some very good friends. This does shake out people that are willing to support you and people that aren't willing to support you. But mostly people are scared. I have had conversation after conversation. I've got social media chats, private DMs and stuff from people saying, I want to help you, but I can't. I can't afford to lose my job because I've got a mortgage to pay. And that's been the common theme, is that despite a lot of my ex-colleagues knowing that I was right and wanting to help, they just couldn't. And that's, makes it even worse, really.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? How the kind of corruption starts, in a sense, or how it arises, right? Because I don't know, maybe there was some genuine mistake, right? Because of this, I don't know, the these housing payments not being index linked or something. Maybe there was a genuine mistake, right? But then, oh, maybe it was ignored, maybe it was pushed under the carpet, and then it becomes it snowballs, right? And like, I don't know, but from a Buddhist perspective, right? Like maybe the people doing that, they felt under pressure. They felt they couldn't do anything because of their own personal family situation or whatever. So it becomes a systemic problem, right? So it's not like there's not necessarily evil people around, right? But there's maybe people who don't stand up and shout up, and then there's people like yourself who do stand up and shout out, So it's a tricky situation, isn't it? But I guess when the system gets like a bit rotten or moldy, then everyone suffers in the end, right? So then it should be, I don't know, it's King Charles needs to step in maybe and. So what's the next step then, Graeme, for you in this case?
Well, I've got an active appeal. I've got an active High Court case, and I'm arguably still fighting the lower court because there's been a whole series of malpractice issues. Just if it was just one or two mistakes, that would be one thing. But we're talking, like 100 issues. Systemic problems again. Mm. Yeah, at every level. So even when I have this smear campaign in the media, discrediting me and calling me all the names under the sun, I'm aware that I had a High Court judgment in my favour, which is never reported by the judge and is never reported by the media. Mm. And that High Court judgment said that the judge in the lower court in the employment tribunal had to reconsider the lawfulness of his actions, and that came from the High Court. But no one knows this.
No one reports it.
No one reports it. No. So I've passed all the information to the local newspaper group, and they refuse to publish any retractions. They refuse to tell my side of the story.
What about The Guardian? Have you been in touch with The Guardian?
Not yet, but I think that's another step.
Yeah.
I did think about the ICIJ.
Oh, international...
Yeah, which does have a base in Berlin, I believe. So
what's ICIJ?
The Panama Papers. So maybe we need the Isle of Man Papers. In fact, funnily enough, I did register tynwaldpapers.com, and I've got a couple of old blog posts on there, which I'm going to be updating soon.
Very.
And can you say something about how this freedom of information requests has helped you?
Yes.
And that process, because I know it's been a bit...
Yeah, it's been torturous in that the cover-up culture is largely focused on you have a bunch of lawyers, they're in charge of all the evidence in public sector whistleblowing cases, which is crazy because they're the ones that are doing a malicious defence. Mm. It's called a malicious defence. And they know I'm right, but what they do is they hide or destroy evidence that's adverse to their case. And I have to try and get proxy evidence from other departments that are not as corrupt as that department. So I've been using freedom of information requests. I've been using subject access requests under the data protection law.
Can you explain those a little bit to our listeners?
Yeah. So if you speak to a trade union, they will say to you right now the only way to help build a case with your own evidence is to do a subject access request for all of the information your employer holds on you or another department holds on you.
Okay.
And so this is how I came...
Like GDPR type
Yeah,
thing.
GDPR. So, we're not in, we weren't in the EU, but the EU GDPR saved me in terms of evidence.
Okay.
So I have all the evidence I need. The problem I have is that the judges won't consider the evidence properly.
Okay.
And this is because my case was prejudged that I would not win it because it was too big a problem. And I didn't know that they knew on day one that then you are as right. And that's the galling thing, really. Yeah, what is the next step? It's just to keep fighting.
And how can people get in touch with you, Graeme? We can put some links in the
Yeah,
show notes. But,
I'm online. I'm a techie and I'm online. So
Twitter.
Yeah, right. As I said, I've got a Tynwald Papers registered, .com registered, and I'm on Twitter and whatever. So
Okay, all right. So we'll put the links in the show notes. Florian, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I have one last question.
Mhm.
What are the lessons learned after all of this ordeal that you have to go over?
yeah, so I've had this conversation with several MPs that are very supportive. Unfortunately, not all of the MPs. Every MP that has their own pet projects, and unfortunately, corruption or the cover-up, culture is not high enough, or people think it's fixed and it isn't fixed. The lessons learned from my point of view is that every time that they covered up these 100 or 200 previous whistleblowers, all they did was make it harder and harder to whistleblow. They keep making new rules to make it harder and harder to whistleblow, and easier to cover up, or more importantly, to get away with covering up. But even with my case and all the evidence I have in my case, I'm still fighting them and still obtaining new evidence pretty much on a week-by-week or month-by-month basis, which is crazy after 4 years or 6 years or 8 years. I just only last week I received a response to a freedom of information request that proved my suspicion that I researched eventually was that I was entitled to legal aid as a married person, and I was lied to by legal aid, by the Treasury that doesn't want to pay out £12 million.
Wow.
So the corruption started in the police department, I thought, but actually it started in the Attorney General's chambers. It involved the police department, it involved the Treasury, it involved the Cabinet Office, it involved pretty much half of the government. And the government arm's length agencies like the Industrial Relations Service and the HR service, and potentially even the IT department, which is even more shocking to me as an IT person. They have changed all the standard policies. If you're into Microsoft or into whatever this sort of platform, that there are default policies, and so all our default policies that would help